if your mind is not pointing in the right direction, like a compass, your beliefs and thoughts about money, about success, about abundance, about wealth will not support you in your trading. And far more importantly, your work to be successful in life will also not be supported by this. Your mind has to be trained to think successfully, to think abundantly, to have a particular psychology that allows you to relate to these situations. If you don't train your mind in these fashions, in these methods, in these areas, you will never achieve a high level of performance in your trading if you haven't built this mindset. It doesn't matter what system you have. It doesn't matter what, risk reward or other things you have in place. Your mind is the one that's making all the decisions. And if the compass is not pointing right, you may think you're going north and you're actually going east. And that will have a deep impact on your trading. Some of these things will have a crucial effect on your success in trading, are planted and are sitting in your subconscious or unconscious beliefs about money and success and wealth right now. Whether you know it or not, they're there. And they are having an impact on you daily. And so what you're going to have to do is what you have to learn to do is to learn to reprogram your mind about money and success. And so to kind of start this up, I want to share an interesting statistic. There was a study done on people in the United States that had won the lottery. And this study was astounding because they found that over 80% of the people that had won the lottery, and we're talking a big prize, tens of millions of dollars, some of them hundreds of millions, over 80% of them within 3 years were broke or right back to where they started. And you're asking yourself, how in the world could that be possible? How could somebody be handed a pile of money, tens of millions of dollars, and 8 out of 10 of them within 3 years will be broke? The answer is that they didn't have the mindset and psychology of abundance. They weren't used to handling that kind of energy, and they ended up making decisions over the next 3 years that ended up destroying all their wealth. It repelled the wealth. It sent it away. They made poor decisions. It's unbelievable. Many of you are probably thinking, my God, I would have been loved to hand that pile of money. And you know what? You were them before they actually won the lotto. They were thinking the same thing. And they were handed that. And you know what? 8 out of 10 of them were just right back where they were 3 years later. And that's because they didn't have the mindset. That's how critical it is. Doesn't matter whether you are given the money. Doesn't matter whether you have all of it. You're handed a big pile of free gift. The bottom line is that if you don't have the mindset to handle it, it will go. It will leave. You won't have it anymore. It will totally go away. Andrea says, very true, cousins won a few million and were broke within 2 years. Case in point. I want to talk about 3 stories that really impacted my life. And then I want to talk about the 5, I want to talk about not the 5, I want to talk about 5 principles of abundance. I'm not going to really say laws, because I think laws is kind of a fixed way to think about it. And I'm not going to claim that I have omnipotence over this subject. So I'm not going to say, hey, I've made a law about this. But what I am going to say is, these are 5 principles that I've been using for years. I've been working with people for years that have been employing these principles. People are very conscious about their wealth. And I've seen it in action And for the last 10 years, every single year, my wealth has increased every single year. From the moment I started employing these practices, my wealth has increased every single year without a single year dipping. And so we're going to talk about the 5 principles of abundance. And I think I'm going to answer your question, Boyke, later on, for sure. But let's start with 3 stories. Okay. The first story, I'm going to call this the story of flow. It's about a person named Hamdi that I used to work with. Over a decade ago, I used to work in this restaurant, and I had this owner. His name was Hamdi. And he was very interesting because he didn't come to the West with much. He was from Turkey. And he didn't have a whole lot when he came. He actually first went to Canada when he went west. And he had started off in college and saved a lot of money. And then he put it into a pizza business. And he had a little, like one-room pizza shop type thing. And he built it up to a very successful business. And then he got a bigger business. He got a full-on restaurant in the States, in California. And I got to work with him, and I got to see him in action a lot. And it was interesting because a lot of times people would come in, services that he had paid for, cleaning services and products and things like that. And they would come to him and they would hand him a bill. And they would hand him the bill and they'd say, hey, here's the bill. You have 30 days to pay this, no big deal, 30 or 60 days or whatever, no big deal. Just pay it when you can. And he would stop and he'd say, no. I'm going to pay you right now. He said, hold on a second. And he would go in the back, he'd go get a check, and he'd be out in a minute or two, and he would hand them the check and say, great, here's that. He's like, are we done? He's like, is there anything else? And he said, no, your account's good, you're good to go. He's like, you're all good, we'll see you next month. He's like, fantastic, thank you. And I had noticed that he would constantly do this. Anytime a bill came in, anytime something that he owed came in, he would pay it immediately, whether he had a whole lot of money in the bank or he had very little. He was always making sure that as soon as a debt came in, he was always paying it as quickly as possible, immediately if he could. And I asked him about it one day, and I told him, I said, I've noticed this habit you have. About always paying bills and things like that. I'm like, don't you ever feel like you should think about, hey, maybe it's better to pay this one, this one, this one? And he said something very interesting to me. He said, you know what? Debts are like a negative energy. If you think about the nature of a debt, they want to take something from you. They are something that you owe. And it's like a weight. It's like an energetic weight. And he said, I don't want any of that in my life. He goes, I want to pay something off as soon as the bill comes to me, as soon as anything comes to me, I want to be rid of it as soon as possible. And I really thought about it, and I was like, wow, that's very interesting. I never thought of it that way. Sometimes I would say, oh, I'm going to hold off paying this bill because I want to have money for this, or I want to, go out to dinner and this and this and that. But what I didn't realize is that these debts were an energetic weight on my finance. And as long as I owed it, it was kind of like an uncompleted cycle that needed to be taken care of. And I also noticed with Hamdi that even though money was always coming in, if a bill came in, he'd pay it out right away. And I had observed that one thing that he had mastery of understanding was flow, the flow of money. I go fly somewhere in business class, I don't put it on credit card, I pay cash. When I bought a house, I paid for it in cash. Why? Because I didn't have any debts holding me back. And because I had no debt, all the money that was coming in I could use for whatever I wanted to. So I worked with the concept of reducing those debts, but also making sure that there was a flow happening. And this was something that impacted me very, very strongly.